So when you're deploying AI, there's a lot of moving parts that are going into this. There's the CRM connection of GoHighLevel. There is the LLM connection of OpenAI, Grok, Claude, whichever LLM you may be using. And then there are things that we enable like tool calling and voice capabilities that you may need to triage throughout the life of your deployment or for a client. And so I'm going to show you how to triage a conversation and some things that may come up as you're deploying your AI that you should look out for if you're seeing things like no response, or you're seeing something like there is a generated response, but it's not making it to the CRM. So I'm going to show you the logs here and how to read them and some things that you should look out for as far as settings on your AI that may cause generations to not happen just because of the settings that are there. So let's go over to the screen here and let's go through this conversation that I have pulled up here. Okay, so I have my conversation pulled up here. And what you can see is there's an AI responding, and then at some point somebody from the CRM jumps in, and now there is no response. Now, this is just one scenario. We're still going to go through the logs, but this is kind of to show you on the front half here some of the settings that you may have that may be stopping the AI from replying. So, here's our conversation, and you notice that I have this little sleep or snooze icon here, and then on the conversation itself, I have the sleep mode up here. Right? And then also take a look here at the AI responses here. So these are two settings that may stop a generation from happening. And what these are is this is the sleep mode timer that happens when there is a workflow or a user that sends a message from the CRM that basically puts the conversation to sleep so that there's no bot/sales rep competing on a conversation for a contact. And then these are max responses here. These are both settings that are in the AI for this conversation. So before we get into the logs here, I'm going to show you these settings, and if you see these, how to turn them off or what to do. So in this one, I have this AI here called response time. So let's go to the response time AI right here. And now I'm going to go under the autopilot settings where we can find both of these things here. And so I have sleep mode here, and I have max responses. These two things will stop a generation if these scenarios are hit. These are meant for autopilot settings to make sure that things like a active deployment doesn't interfere with sales reps and sales reps don't interfere with AI. And this is also meant for a max response framework so that no one is messing with your AI and just blowing up a conversation for no reason, right? Or you may have someone where you only need so many messages and then it's no longer a qualified lead. These two settings right here will stop a generation if those things happen. So if we have max responses here, which is basically the maximum amount of responses an AI will handle in the conversation. Now this is per AI that is actively in the conversation here. These are the max amount of responses for a conversation as far as AI generation, right? And so we can set this dynamically here, where if in a deployment, I only want this thing to max send somebody 25 responses, 25 messages. We do that here. And then now any conversation where this AI reacts, it's set as a max limit of 25 AI responses in that conversation with any AI at the time, right? So just at a data level, every time an AI responds, that counts how many times an AI responds. And whatever AI is active on the conversation sets the active limit at that moment. And so if you have more AI generations, more AI responses than you do in your max responses, it'll stop the conversation because that's over the max responses in there. If you see that pop up more often, you can increase this limit to whatever you want. You can put like 1,000 on there if it's no big deal for you. Now the second one is the sleep mode. And what this one does is it proactively stops someone like a sales rep, a support rep, whatever, interfering with the AI and they competing with each other for a conversation. If you've ever used AI in a deployment, sometimes, especially if you have clients, they'll try to jump into a conversation proactively. Maybe they're excited while the AI is going. And so now you have two people talking in one conversation. Makes for a very awkward conversation with a client. And so the sleep mode setting here, what it does is every time there is a message outbound to a client from either a workflow or a user, either one, it'll put the conversation to sleep for however many minutes here that you've specified at the time, right? That's why we had the sleep mode on that other conversation over there, because I went ahead and just set one manually from my CRM here, which put the AI into sleep mode for this conversation here. Now, you can turn that off on your AI if you see this come up a ton, because it's technically blocking any AI response. So I can turn that off here, no big deal. So it says your assistant will continue to reply with no interruption. But if you have this on, it'll stop for XYZ minutes when a message from a user or workflow comes through on that conversation. So these are two settings that you may see interrupting some response generation just for triage here, and they'll be denoted by sleep mode here. And then you can see your responses. I have 20 AI responses in this conversation. At the time, the limit was 1,200 for this AI. You can change those dynamically, and if it's in sleep mode, you can just cancel the sleep mode here and then turn that setting off. Okay, now all else being equal here, we have this conversation going. So let's go ahead and send in an inbound message here, and I'll show you the flow of the logs, because the logs give you a lot of insight into what is happening in the conversation and how to look at the inner workings of the AI conversation to triage further. So if I come here into this logs, there's a button up here. It's like a little terminal, little code thing up here. You can click on that, and then you should see a couple things here. We should see message added, processing, message run, message added. So 4 things. In the sequence of how this works, you have a message that comes in, right, inbound. That's message added. You have processing, which is the looking back at the contact, making sure there's an active tag, putting together the snapshot of the prompt, the time of processing, and kind of preparing this request to the LLM provider. You have finish run, which shows you all of the data that's going into this actual chat run. So if you have a lot of custom tools, if you have a really long conversation log, if you have a prompt, or we do some injecting and some post-processing on the output, you can see all of that here. And then of course, once that finishes, it responds, and then we get obviously another message added to the conversation here. The way to triage these things is this first one in this sequence of these 4, right? This is the inbound message coming in from the contact. If we open that up here, you can see all of this happening here at once. We can see at the time that the message came in, the tags that were on the contact. We can see what the message said, the contact ID, the conversation ID, what channel that this is happening in the conversation, which direction, if there are any attachments available here, so images, sounds, whatever, and then a briefing of the GoHighLevel contact, so everything that you can pull from HighLevel over that contact. So it's just a snapshot of this message being added, and now at the top here you see this complete, response time, message added, connection status, and timestamp. You can use these as kind of status slash, like a look back on triage, and what this basically says is, as these things happen, is obviously it's complete. So this happened and it's complete. The active tag here was, there was an active tag at the time that this message was added, and so it went ahead and assigned the AI to this conversation for this message, right? Now, if you have a conversation where you don't have an active tag, you'll see something to the effect of this right here, where these are the tags at the time of processing, rather than there's an active tag on there. These are the tags that were on the contact at the time of processing, so you can triage that too. So if there's no active tag being found, you can see at least what tags were on there at the time of processing that message. And you can see the difference here, where we do have an active tag versus where we don't. Now, This event just kind of shows you what's happening at that time frame. So message added, we're processing it, we finished up the run, and then we've replied / message added. And then the connection status, so this is OAuth. So we'll tell you at the time of processing, yes, you did have OAuth on the account, or no, you did not. Now this one doesn't show it. We're going to add it in there, but this is just basically saying we sent it, so no big deal, right? And then you have your timestamp when these things happen. So if you're kind of triaging time frames end-to-end response here, you can look at the timestamps just to see what's going on when things are happening, right? All of that is available for you here. So if we click into this first message added, we saw all the stuff that was in here. This is the inbound message that came from the contact, all right? Then we have about a 5-second wait from the time the message is added to the time we begin to process it, just to wait for any active tags that may be on the contact or may be added via workflow so that we do not miss them. We have about a 5-second grace period there, where if you're doing something like a lead responds, add tag, right, so that we catch it, that's going to be here. It's going to be very, very similar to this one, but you'll just get a reiteration of the contacts at the time of processing, or the tags, the contacts tags at the time of processing. Just in case there's any discrepancy here, again, being added, being removed by workflow, 5 seconds is a good time frame for the time that GoHighLevel will run through a workflow. And this just kind of gives you a snapshot at those timestamps, what was on the contact, so that if you don't have one responding, you don't see an active tag here, well, you can at least see the tags that were on there and say, oh, well, it wasn't added. Maybe I need to add it sooner in the workflow, or maybe I need to proactively add it sooner in the client lifecycle. Whatever that may be, this just gives you a snapshot here. Now, I did have an active tag on. I noticed that because I see the active tag here, and I also noticed that it was properly assigned to this conversation up here. So our run will begin, especially because I don't have my max AI responses over or meeting that criteria, and I don't have the conversation on sleep mode right now. So a generation will begin. We can open that up here to see the run that happened and everything that was sent to the LLM provider. This is going to be a little overwhelming at first, but I'll break it down as easily as possible. And I've even added some emojis here so that you can look at it and kind of understand everything that's happening. So up here is your raw conversation logs. So everything that's been said, who said it, tool calls, all of that data associated, so that you can see all of the data associated with the conversation. That's here in a snapshot in JSON format. No big deal, you can skip over that. You can see the tools that were added for this run. So if you have tools on your assistant, whether they be ones that were built in-house or custom ones, you can see a snapshot of what they look like here on this run. All those are here. We can also see the raw response from the LLM provider based on these two things. So we ran it through. OpenAI gave us a response. What was that response? We can see that here. And if any errors come up in the LLM response, this is a good place to triage, because this happens sometimes if you have improper tool calls, some sort of data. We do a lot of auto-correcting on the data, but if some of that came through, you'll be able to see that here. And you'll see the raw response from OpenAI, where this tends to happen a lot. It's either going to be on that last thing, that message added, or it's going to be here. So you open this up, you can see the raw response from OpenAI right here. Now everything's good on this configuration, so we're good to go. But if you see anything different, any errors or anything associated with the LLM provider, you can see that right here under raw response. And we just have a reiteration of the tool call list, our prompt. So this is my prompt along with all of the injection for the contact information and everything that happens on the back end of the system itself of Assistable. So we feed in full context about the contact's information, what we do and do not have, so that you don't have to fill that out. You don't have to use the variables. It's just known in the conversation, all of that information that's native to GoHighLevel. So you can see a snapshot of that and how that works, and even sort of the context that happens if you have a knowledge base attached. And then down here you can see the output. So the same output that came from OpenAI up here. You can see the output here. A processed output in case you have find and replace turned on. And then a null handler in case there's a tool call. And if the AI happened to call any tools during its response, you'll see that here. This is the finished run, which just kind of shows you the LLM provider, what's happening in there, right? A lot of the times, if I see a non-generation or something like that, the first place I do is I open that up. I look at the first line here at this raw response. Sometimes there's an error. Maybe you have two parameters of the same name inside of a tool. Or I look down here at the output, which should show you if there is any problems with the LLM provider, they will show up here. And this will not say completed, but it will show the errors from the LLM exactly there. And the last one is another place where I see, potentially a lot of errors. This could be something with OAuth. This could be something with the way you have GoHighLevel configured. There's a lot of variables that go into these things. That's why we're so transparent in our server logs, so that you can be self-sufficient and help your own clients and help your own deployment and everything in a real meaningful way. A lot of times if I see a non-generation, if it doesn't meet any of the other criteria, so we're under our AI responses, we don't have a sleep mode, everything was fine on the LLM call, but we're still not getting that message that's generated and in this log, it's not sent to GoHighLevel for whatever reason. I open this up here, and you can see the raw process log for OpenAI, or for GoHighLevel, which is the conversation ID, the message ID, and the trace ID from the actual sending of this message. All right. If the message was not sent for whatever reason, you will see the error from GoHighLevel directly here. Okay. And you can see here the raw response that was sent to GoHighLevel, type SMS under this contact. This is the message, and this is the timestamp that it happened. So you can see all of that transparently there. Those 4 logs are crucial when you're going out and deploying AI to make sure that your active tag is being added, that everything is processing as it should, and if you need to triage something like it's taking too long, you could do that here by looking at the timestamps to see when is everything happening and what do I need to optimize, right? Now, just some other scenarios that we can see again from this one here. If there is no active tag, you'll get what available tags were on the contact at the time of processing. We can see here that the message was added. We did have some tags on here, but none of them were an active tag. This was a message added event. Our connection status was good, so we were able to pull all of this in a real meaningful way, but there just wasn't an active tag, so no generation at this time. And the same thing here, where beforehand it looks like we had a message added. We did have an AI on. The message was added, and this looks like a generation here, so this was actually an appointment booked. You can see all of that fun stuff here, and even in the request log, there's 2 here. There's one from the tool call itself, and there's one for the actual, send through of the, AI process itself. So you can see both of those things happen here. If there is a tool call, you'll see an additional request log with the information from the tool call itself, along with the visual indicator that sits inside of the chat. So you'll see here, if I scroll up to a tool call, you'll see this stuff here, but this also comes in as an additional request log. So that is how you go in and you triage and look at the logs to be able to see if something is happening, why is it happening, and then the transparent idea of going in there and just making sure everything looks correct. So again, if you run into something like a non-generation, you can see, oh, I don't have an active tag, or my active tag's not picking up, or my OAuth is not connected, or oh, I have 2 parameters. OpenAI, let me know I have 2 parameters in the same tool call, whatever it may be. You can see all of that very transparently there, and then triage yourself the entire process of an AI generation, not only for yourself, but for your clients. So those are the things you should look out for. Some common things typically are OAuth, or now these parameters of sleep mode / AI responses being over the actual limit that's being set at the AI at the time. But you can see everything else to be able to triage it. But that's how you look at logs. That's what each log means. That's how you read them. And those are some of the scenarios where on purpose you wouldn't get a generation. And then if by accident you don't get a generation, you can at least go in and look to see why. It typically comes down to something like an input somewhere, like a tool call or something like that. But we give you the log so that you can see it. So easy enough. That's how you read logs and triage a conversation.